Hi, so my name is Jasmine Waddell. I am the head of career development for the Heller School, and I am really excited to announce this first of our virtual DC track events for this year, 2023. And I can't think of a better way to kick this off than with a alum, class of 2015 SID alum, Andrea Cristancho. So I have to tell the quick story, which is that when every year for the past couple of years, we've had a DC track, and for the past 2 or 3 years, it's been canceled. And this year we were hoping that we would have an in-person trek. And unfortunately, it was again canceled because of abundance of caution. But we decided we're not going to back down. We're going to have this trek, but it's going to be virtual. And at the same time, Andrea sent me an email and said, I just became a foreign service officer, and I really want to share the USAID with students in this program that made such a big difference to me. And I said, absolutely. And so I am really excited to be announcing or introducing her and welcoming this conversation. So with that, thank you. Take it away, Andrea.
No, thank you very much. I do remember being in the shoes of the graduate students at Heller and always thought, anytime that you have a chance to network, especially because I did this 7 years ago, we went to New York and DC, and I thought it was really, really helpful. And so just remembering that, I wanted to take that opportunity and share with you guys my experience. And I've been part of it for many years, actually. But just not with USAID. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I will ask that if you can kindly mute your mic, just to make sure that we're not hearing any background noise. That would be lovely. So good day, wherever you are joining us. I am here in Virginia, so it's good afternoon. My name is Andrea Cristancho, and as mentioned, I'm class 2015. And I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to introduce myself and my journey in international development. Of course, we'll have time for questions after everyone on the panel has presented. So you can hold your questions for that moment. All right. So I do want to start by saying that this is my own path. I know sometimes when doing these career panels, people want to know, like, what exactly did you do? And I do want to say that whatever you choose is the right choice for you. This is just what I did. So take it with a grain of salt. Some things worked out great for me and some things didn't. And so I'm just going to take us back to, I guess, before I joined Heller. I do want to say that I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Romania, and I was an education volunteer. I worked in 2 elementary schools. I was also the president of the Gender and Development Committee and ran a couple of English clubs in the summer and the winter. I'm sure that there are a lot of Heller folks here who are either Peace Corps volunteers or you work with Peace Corps volunteers in your country. So you're pretty familiar with that process. When I finished Peace Corps, I joined Heller. And like many of you, my first year, I took all the required courses. I do want to say that I took advantage of all the extra career advantages that Heller has, or academic advantages that has. So there were a couple of weekend seminars that I participated in. It was how to present to a client, which, believe me, I utilized that in my career for 7 years. And then there was also like a statistics course in the winter that I also took advantage of. For my practicum, I went to Tanzania, where I collected data on literacy and numeracy for young kids that were part of an NGO. That practicum, which I'm sure some of you either have one right now or are looking for one or are currently in one, if you do not have one, don't stress out. I don't think mine came about until like March or April, and then I left in August. And so just be really persistent and use your network to find a practicum. I was able to find my practicum through another Heller student who had just finished her practicum in Tanzania. And so I made that connection, and that's how I ended up in Tanzania. After graduating Heller, I moved back to Chicago. That's where I'm from. And it was very hard for me to find a job. And I say that because I know we might all find ourselves in that situation. And I was great. And so when I was in Chicago, I was applying for a lot of jobs, and I found it very difficult. I wanted to stay in the States at that moment. So I moved to DC, and I utilized all my networks from all of these meetings, the week long in what was New York and DC. And when I went to DC, I reached out to all those people who presented and said, hey, can I have an informational interview? I'm looking for a job in international development. Can you tell me what you do? And I will say that none of those interviews led to a direct job, but they led me to a connection about another company that I was unaware of. And so, I'm going to keep emphasizing that you utilize the people you speak with, people who work in the field, to get you that connection. And so anyway, so in DC, I found the job I was working for a small company. I stayed working with them for 4 years. I did business development and program implementation, and working in a small business gives you that opportunity to wear so many different hats. So I know that sometimes we have these ambitious goals to go and work for the biggest organization, the one that's really well known with the best title. But sometimes when you are in a place where you really have to diversify and work really quickly, you learn a lot of things. So I learned how to write proposals for USAID at the time. I learned how to develop budgets, which is something that you are going to have to do. I learned how to collect information from other countries, travel to other countries during that time frame. So I worked for 7 years in DC for 3 different implementing partners. It was a small business, medium, and large. It's just sort of how it worked out, all in various sectors. I started thinking that I wanted to stay in education, but once I was exposed to various work in DC and international development, I realized that there's a lot more to do than just one thing. And that was just what I chose to do. So after 7 years of working for implementing partners, like 2 years ago, I applied for this job that I currently hold with USAID as a Foreign Service Officer. At USAID, they call it backstop. So my focus here is contracting officer. There are others that I'm sure people will go over. Education, I won't say all of them because I might be wrong, but for your awareness, and maybe we'll go into this detail further later on. From the moment that I applied to the moment that I was hired, it was a 2-year process. So that's completing the online application, waiting to be called, and then going to the interview. Then they have to check your references. They do a background check, medical clearance. So for this job specifically, that's how long it took me. I know other people might take longer or shorter. That was my experience. And so in summary, that's sort of my job history, just so you get a sense, and happy to go into more details after. I know that when I was at Heller, I thought, what skills am I going to use at work? What classes should I take? And so the first one that I want to emphasize is the writing skills, because regardless of what job you do, you will always have to write a very good email, a convincing email, a memo, a proposal. If you end up staying in DC and you work for any of the implementing partners, it does not matter what you do. You are going to have to write a proposal, and you're going to have to know how to write well, regardless of what you do. In my 7 years, I worked with a lot of different individuals throughout the company who held different positions and all had to write. So I think the writing aspect of the work that we do at Heller is
And then
incredibly
one more time, you said 11/23
90,
94.
yes, please.
Oh, I think that someone just unmuted.
What's your current home address with city, state, and zip code?
Okay, 65.
Great. And then the other aspect that I would like to mention are the courses that I took. So Godoy was my advisor, and a lot of the classes, the gap that I did like a self-assessment before I started Heller, and I said, you know, I need to get better at statistics and data analytics. And so I took a lot of the data classes, which I used throughout my 7 years in working for implementing partners. Any of the topics on development economics, I found incredibly useful when reading reports or writing responses to proposals. And then I don't know if this class is still offered, but P&I, which is basically writing proposals, because if you're not working for the client, you're working towards getting work. And so those are the courses that I remember the most and that I thought were most useful. The last two aspects here about my skills, anytime that I had a chance to lead things. So when we did this DC New York training trip, I organized one of the coordinating sessions with one of the companies. So, you know, that's sort of like a leadership example of what you can do to sharpen that skill if you don't have it. Collaboration with other Heller peers. Heller is a really good example of what working in international development will be, because a lot of you are from other countries, and that's what we do. So being able to work collaboratively across cultures and be able to communicate across a range of individuals, it is something that I learned really well at Heller throughout the 2 years there, and one that I definitely have used since then. And then public speaking, I feel like that's something that I always try to improve. And then at Heller, any opportunity that I had to improve public speaking, I also took that on as a skill that I wanted to enhance. And then lastly, don't forget about your peers. I think in the last 8 years, I have reached out to so many of my Heller peers, just because we work in the same industry. It's so small. And that is like one of the best networks that you are going to have. And it's right there. You don't really have to do anything because it's been given to you. All right. And then I'll just close with this slide. I guess maybe you might ask about some advice and some things that I've learned along the way. And so the first one is be humble and also promote yourself. So, and I say this because I was in your shoes. When you graduate, you feel like, oh, you have all these skills. You went to the Heller School. It's recognized. You would feel like you can, and you probably can provide so much support to so many organizations, but they don't know you. And so they might give you a task that you feel like, you know, it's kind of like below what you could do. But remember to be humble. Because if you can do that task well, they will task you with more. They will trust you, and they will continue to ask you to do things until you are doing the things that you actually want to do. You sort of have to be humble with some of the things they do. But at the same time, you have to self-promote yourself, because no one is going to promote yourself. No one's going to promote you better than you can. So find that fine line between promoting yourself and being humble in the work that you do. Next, and I know you've heard this before, never, ever burn a bridge, because this world is too small. People do not direct referencing, indirect referencing. So like if you work somewhere, they will contact people. So just keep that in the back of your mind in any situation. Sometimes you might be working somewhere where you are no longer happy. Don't burn that bridge. And then lastly, something that I've talked throughout this presentation is to network. I know there are individuals who don't feel comfortable networking. It might be out of your comfort zone to go to events, to greet people, to talk. But now you can just reach out to people on LinkedIn. You can send them a message. You can have a phone conversation. It could be a one-on-one 30-minute conversation. And it doesn't really take a lot. but just continue to be curious about the work that other people are doing, because you will learn, you will be exposed to new ideas. It doesn't mean that you're going to jump from one thing to the next, but it is good for you to know what's out there, so you know like how to plan your career. I mean, that I'm still in it. I'm still, you know, I still have I have like maybe 30 more years to go. So anyway, with that, I hope that I didn't take too much time. Here is my personal email. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I am always happy to chat with people from Heller on the phone, or if you're in DC. But I'll hand it over to my colleagues at USAID for the next presentation. Thank you.
Hold on for 1 second. Let me share my screen with everybody. Here we go. Just make sure I have the presentation up.
While Creighton does this, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Andrea. That was wonderful. And I am excited to see the collaborations and the conversations that ensue afterwards.
Okay. Let's try this again. Share. Can everybody see my screen? And it's the first page for the slideshow, right? Great. We ran into some issues yesterday, so I just want to make sure that this is working. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Creighton Lee, and I'm an Outreach and Marketing Program Manager with the U.S. Agency for International Development. And today, some of my colleagues in the Office of External Outreach and Strategic Recruitment are going to share some information with you all about career opportunities within USAID. And I ask that if you do have any questions, that you hold those questions for the Q&A portion of today's panel discussion, so that my colleagues and I can, answer those questions to the best of our ability. So without further ado, I will begin the presentation. So for those of you who aren't familiar with USAID, we are the premier federal agency for foreign assistance and the world leader in the humanitarian aid in the developing world. We're also an independent agency operating under this general policy guidance of the U.S. Secretary of State. Sometimes there's confusion as to whether or not we are actually part of a state, but what I like to let everybody know is that we are autonomous and we are a separate entity from the U.S. State Department. And in addition, we operate in over 100 countries with more than 75 offices, which we refer to as missions around the world. And this is just a list of some of the things that we do. USAID works to address U.S. national security, economic prosperity, and we also promote a path to recipient self-reliance and resilience. And this is just a snapshot of where we are currently located around the world. All the countries and areas that are highlighted are where we have missions, as I previously stated in the slide, a couple slides before this. But we have a presence in the Caribbean, Central and South America, the majority of Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, as well as Asia and Southeast Asia. And now I will pass the baton over to my colleague, Diane Moore, who will talk to you all more about careers within the Foreign Service.
Hi, everybody. So these are the different careers that we have. We call them, as was mentioned earlier, we call them backstops, but it just means a technical specialty that that we have. There are 13 of them. Humanitarian assistance is their most recently created one, where we've separated that out and from our prior backstop of democracy and governance. It used to be crisis and stabilization, and now it's humanitarian assistance. So these are all different specialty areas that you can apply for. Next slide. Now, almost all of our positions in the Foreign Service do require a master's degree. These are some sample degrees, but they're certainly not all-inclusive. For example, we also have environment, engineering, economist, well, we have economics listed there, and many other degrees also would qualify you. For example, we have contracting officers overseas, and they can have a degree in a wide variety of areas, as can executive officers and program officers who do strategic planning. And there are many degrees that give you training in doing planning. So this is not a comprehensive list, but it's an example of many of the degrees that would qualify you to apply. Next slide, please. Now, there is a requirement for most of our Foreign Service positions for you to have 2 years of overseas or diverse work experience. Now, overseas should be pretty clear, working for the Peace Corps, working for the UN, working at a USAID mission overseas, military service, civilian service in a federal agency, working at an NGO. Those are all ways that you can obtain experience working overseas in the area that you're applying for. But other ways to gain this experience include service in the United States. It could be any work where you are working in a culture that is different than the one that you grew up in. It might be working on an Indian reservation. It might be working with Teach for America or AmeriCorps, where you're providing service in a community that's very different than your own. Learning or using another language than the one that you grew up with is another way that you're exposed to another culture. It could be working with refugees, many different types of work. Also, please be aware that it doesn't have to be 2 years of continuous work, and it can include volunteer work. Many people decide to spend their summers working overseas as a volunteer, or they volunteer in their communities or with FEMA or other organizations where they again have that exposure to other cultures and life experiences. So this is really, we're trying to determine that you have been successful in the past in working in that kind of environment that we're going to throw you into after a year or two in Washington. You're going to be in another culture completely, and we're looking for that kind of experience. Again, it's not applicable to every one of our jobs, but it is to most of our jobs, of our Foreign Service positions. Next slide, please. These are some of the requirements for the Foreign Service. After you've been selected, after you go through reference checks, then you start a clearance process with us. So you have to receive a top secret security clearance. That can take several months. For many people, it's very fast. But for people who've lived or worked overseas, then it might take a little longer because our security personnel have to look into your experience overseas. And so we have to communicate with the embassy there, and then they go forth and do some investigation in that country about your presence there. You also are considered worldwide available, meaning you have to have a medical that allows you to work in any country without having continual medical support. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have a medical condition. You can. Many Foreign Service officers work very successfully while managing conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, mental health concerns, as long as it can be managed without having to have services in a country. Like you can have a medication that you take with you, or it's monitored periodically whenever you are in the United States. As long as you can successfully work overseas without having to have constant support, then that condition probably can allow you to work in the Foreign Service. And there's all the time changes to this policy where it's becoming more possible for people to work in the Foreign Service with various conditions. There's also a possibility to get a waiver if most of our posts, if you would be able to work in most of our locations with that particular condition. So you shouldn't give up, even though you may have a condition you manage. And also I want to emphasize that people with disabilities are especially encouraged to apply. Many disabilities can be managed in an embassy environment. So you should also not consider that something that would discourage you from applying. We also have to receive your official transcripts from your university. And here I would like to alert people that if you attended a foreign university, you can still use that to apply, in addition to the Heller School, of course. If you're using that as part of your application, then you need to get an accreditation, and you can find out more information about that in our vacancy announcements, links to organizations that perform that accreditation. However, if your master's degree is from Brandeis, it's not a problem. But if you're using some other degree like a JD to apply for a legal officer in addition to your degree with Brandeis, then you might have to ensure that you get that accreditation. So, and we're always welcome to receive your questions and respond to them. Next slide. Now, how do we decide where you'll go? Everyone that works for us is worldwide available, meaning anywhere that USAID works, you might be having an opportunity to go and work. That doesn't include Paris, it doesn't include London, but you can imagine the places where USAID works, you'd probably be correct. And as long as our government has a positive working relationship with that country, we very likely have a program in a developing country. Some places it's not possible just because of the security situation in that country. Usually those are places where we also don't have an embassy. But your first assignment overseas is going to be a directed assignment, meaning we will determine what that assignment will be. In general, these are places that might be regional offices, might be larger, because we also have to have a supervisor available who can supervise and mentor you for your first 2 years overseas. We don't just throw you out there and expect you to be successful. So you have training in Washington, and then your training continues at your first post. After that first post, then you start bidding in the assignment process, just like every other Foreign Service officer. So you get to submit, you look at the list of positions that are becoming available that year. About a third of all of our positions are available to bid on every year. And then you rank order your bids 1 through 8. And I would say that over 80% of people in our agency get their first, one of their first 3 choices. So it is very likely that you would be able to go to one of your first choices. And even if you don't, oftentimes people find that something they didn't think they would love, it ends up being their favorite post ever. So having an open mind coming into the Foreign Service is always the best approach. And again, we remind you that there is the potential for going to any country overseas. So people should enter the Foreign Service with the approach that they will learn new things, have new experiences, and get to know people from all over the world. And I think that might be my last slide. Yes. And I'll stay on and I'll answer questions that people might have about the Foreign Service in the chat.
Thanks, Diane. So in addition to positions that are located overseas within our Foreign Service, USAID also has a bevy of civil service positions, i.e. positions that are located domestically here in the States as well. And some of the positions that are available in the civil service are listed in front of you. So we have positions, for individuals who want to be contract specialists, those of you who may be interested in human resource work, IT or information technology, public affairs, accounting and finance, administrative, program management, and as well as security investigator positions. And in terms of becoming a civil servant with the agency, there's primarily only two requirements. You must be a U.S. citizen, and you must be able to receive a secret clearance or facilities access clearance, which would allow you to work for the agency. And again, this is required for all civil service employees. And in addition, we have very good benefits for those individuals working in the foreign and the civil service at USAID. And those include obviously retirement, health insurance, a thrift savings plan, or a TSP, which is the equivalent of like a 401k, in addition to annual and sick leave. But then for those of you interested in the foreign service, we also have benefits that include housing, paid allowances based on your location, education allowance if you have children, home leave and R&R leave, and the ability to go or attend the Foreign Service Institute for Language, which basically is where you would go to learn the language of the post that you'd be sent to, in addition to exposure to life abroad. And now I'll have my colleague Melanie White talk to you all about internships and fellowships.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Creighton said, my name is Melanie White, and I'm one of the program managers with the student employment team focusing on internships and recent graduate opportunities. As you can see on the first slide, and which talks about internships at USAID, we offer paid internships through the federal government's internship program and recent graduate program, which is called the Pathways program. And we also offer internships through our third-party partners and other educational institutions. Let's hold on for 1 second. I need to go full screen, couldn't see there. In terms of fellowships, we offer fellowships through the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, which is part of the Pathways program, the Recent Graduates Program, which is part of Pathways, and the Donald M. Payne International Development Graduate Fellowship Program. On the next few slides, I'll talk about these programs in more detail. Next slide, please. So in terms of internships, this year has been a very exciting year for USAID because USAID, we expanded our internship programs. So our internship programs are all year. Previously, we only had internship opportunities in the summertime, but now we have internship opportunities all year. And we even have, for this summer, we have a pilot program for students who work in the missions. So first, to be an intern, you must be a student and remain a student throughout the whole internship. If you graduate while you're working as an intern, your internship ends because the federal government defines a student to be someone who's currently enrolled at an educational institution. Our interns are compensated and are able to work up to 12 weeks. Depending on the time of year when interns start, some work 10, but the maximum is about 12. We accept applications seasonally. We have a fall winter program, which runs August through December, and we accept applications in April. We have a program for the winter spring, which is January through May. We accept applications in July. And for the summer, which is typically May through August, we accept applications in October through November. Now, please note, we accept applications well in advance. We advertise on USA Jobs well in advance because clearances are required. So not only do we have to take you through the application process, interviewing, being selected, but you also have to go through the clearance process. So we like to leave time for you to clear successfully without being in a last minute rush. And then the next bullet talks about overseas missions internship program, which I said we're offering this summer. That means that we're putting students in the missions to work 10 to 12 weeks. This year, we're only putting, or placing, I should say, 10 students to work around the world. We really are in Latin America, Europe and Eurasia, and I guess the only place we're not, I don't think we have a location in Africa, but we have about, I think, about 7 different missions who are participating. So this means for the summer of 2024, if everything goes well, which we expect it to go well this summer, we'll be offering many other opportunities for students to work worldwide in our missions during the summer. And it is a paid opportunity. And at this point in time, USAID is paying for everything: transportation, housing, incidentals. So it is a excellent opportunity. Also, USAID for the first time will be offering a 1-year internship program to further encourage careers in international development. This is a program that we're working on now. We're just starting the recruiting process for this now, but this program will allow interns to be able to work with us all year so that they can, learn more about the agency, not have to worry about rolling off before they've learned as much as they want to learn. So as long as you're a student, they'll be eligible to participate. Also for our managers really love engaging interns. And if they have an intern who will be with us a little bit longer than 10 weeks, of course, they'll give you more interesting projects to work on. So we think this will be a win-win for everyone. Please note that we are working on the application for this, meaning the job announcement, which will allow people to apply. This should open up next week. So if you're interested, we suggest that you go to www.usadjobs.gov, and in that site, you have to create a profile. In your profile, you can create an alert for internship opportunities at USAID. So when that opens up next week, you'll automatically be notified that there's an opportunity for an internship. And also when any internship opportunities open up, you'll automatically be notified if you set up that alert. Okay. So next is fellowships. So the first fellowship opportunity, I know everyone is in a graduate program right now, but for those who are graduating soon, the first fellowship is the Presidential Management Fellowship. This falls under the Pathways program. And let me back up a little bit. I should explain. I said the Pathways program is the federal government's official program for students and recent graduates. So think about an umbrella for Pathways. Underneath Pathways, you have internships, you have recent graduates opportunity, and the PMF program, which is the one that we're talking about right now. But it is the premier leadership program for the federal government. This is an excellent program to apply to because you have to have a master's degree, and you can apply to this program up to 2 years after you've graduated. So this program will take you through advanced training. You'll have a rotation assignment with another organization, and it really prepares you for leadership in the federal government. Now, the window for applying is typically in October. OPM manages this program in terms of the application part of the process. You have to apply and be accepted as a PMF finalist, and then they send the finalists to the different agencies so that the finalists can apply for opportunities in the agencies. USAID hires on average 9 to 15 hires per year. And if you'd like to learn more about this program, they can go out to www.pmf.gov. Okay. And the other fellowship program is the Recent Graduates Program. This is a 1-year development program, and the difference between this one and the other one, this one is for undergraduates as well as graduates. And people may also apply within 2 years of graduation. And the Recent Graduates Program is not utilized as well as a PMF program. And I'll explain why. It's a wonderful opportunity, but this is funded by our different bureaus and independent offices, and they have to have the specific opportunity available to advertise for. And a lot of our positions are more at the senior level at this time, but we are looking at different strategies to increase opportunities for people at a recent graduates level. So this is a program that you could put in USAID jobs as well, an alert for recent graduate opportunities at USAID. So when something becomes available, you can apply as well. Next opportunity. This fellowship program may not really apply to everyone because I understand everyone's in graduate school already. But you know, we believe that everyone's an ambassador for the agency. So if this doesn't apply to you, maybe you know of others who may be interested in this opportunity. But the Donald M. Payne International Development Graduate Fellowship Program, it was created to encourage careers as a Foreign Service officer for those who typically are underrepresented in international development, as well as those in need of financial aid. So this is an opportunity that basically pays for your graduate studies. And upon graduation, you're guaranteed a position as a Foreign Service officer. So if you know that you're interested in working for the Foreign Service, or I should say others know that they're interested in working as a Foreign Service officer, exploring a career in international development, this is a good opportunity to explore. You have to first apply to a graduate program, and then you have to apply to our program as well. But we typically pay up to $104,000 in benefits over 2 years for graduate school internships and professional development activities, which is wonderful. As the unique pathways to USAID Foreign Service, which I mentioned. Our program is managed by Howard University, but you don't have to go to school at Howard. It's just managed by Howard University. It supports master degree studies 2 years. Graduates join as Foreign Service officers. The first year before you actually come in the program, you'll have an internship in Washington, D.C. And in the second year, we'll place you overseas at one of our missions as an intern. Now, upon graduation, there is a 5-year service requirement that you have to work with USAID for 5 years to pay us back, but it's worth it if this is really what you want to do. Our application deadline typically is in November. Okay, next, please. Okay, this is just basically saying some of the things I said. For all the opportunities, you must apply to be considered. Our programs allow students to participate in projects which are vital to the success of the U.S. foreign policy. I agree. Most of our interns or fellows have great projects to work on, but that doesn't mean that someone will come along and give you an administrative assignment. We all have administrative assignments that we have to do. So keep that in mind. I have administrative assignments. My other colleagues have administrative assignments. So someone actually do something on the administrative side, that's part of the job. Internship positions are located, as I said, in Washington, D.C. and select missions throughout the world. Please keep in mind, because of COVID, that changed how we work. And now there are many more opportunities for people to work remotely. So if you're interested in an internship opportunity and you live in California and you see it's in Washington, D.C., apply. Chances are they'll allow you to work remotely. It's a new world. COVID did change that type of work environment to the better. Let's see. Please keep in mind that U.S. citizenship is required for all of our opportunities as interns and fellows. And for more information, we have information on our website, www.usaid.gov/careers. And I think that's it for my slides. Thank you, unless anyone has questions.
This has really been wonderful. So I'm not sure, I know you had a very well-defined agenda, and I feel like there was so much information, and it was so valuable. but I'm wondering if you're willing to take questions.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. So, any questions anybody has, feel free to ask myself, Andrea, Diane, or Melanie. We're here at you all's disposal. So,
Great. And I've been answering on the back end too.
oh, I didn't
Okay,
realize
yeah,
you
I
were
noticed.
there. Hey, Linda. Linda's another
Great.
colleague of ours as well.
Just so everyone knows, Linda Wilson is my team lead for the student employment programs. So she's our fearless leader. And like she said, she's on the back end to answer any questions as well. There goes Linda.
Yeah, I've been answering some of the questions in the chat. So gotcha.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is an invitation for questions. We have, do you want to go ahead and take them, Andrea, or would you like me to, or how would you like to do it?
Please go ahead. Mhm.
Okay, so Andy, I see your hand first.
Hey, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciated everything that was shared. I think my question is for the USAID team. I'm curious if the USAID follows the same structure as the State Department with the GS9, GS11, GS12 levels, and what type of security clearance is normally required for civil service roles, not foreign service, civil service roles. Thank you.
You're on mute, Linda.
Sorry. Want me to take it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so yes, we do use the same hiring practices as far as the GS grade levels. GS not 5, 7, 9, 11, 12, same premise. And US citizenship is required, and secret clearance for those working domestically. For overseas, you are required to have a top secret clearance. For those of us who work in Washington, such as myself, Melanie, and Creighton, we are required to have a secret clearance. And for students, if you're coming in, that's the only difference. I'm sorry, let me caveat on that. For students who come into the agency, they're only required to have a facility access, which is just the public trust type of clearance level. So you don't have to go the full background investigation.
Thank you. Huntley?
Thank you again so much. I have a two-part question. My first part is, for those of us who are dual citizenships, are we required to renounce in order to pursue at either the foreign service or civil roles in USAID?
I was going to say, Diane just answered this question yesterday during the session. So
Sure. I can answer it for the Foreign Service, and I expect that it would be even more possible for civil service, but I won't speak to that. For the Foreign Service, it's a top secret clearance, which is a higher level clearance. And it used to be, when I first joined about 20 years ago, it was assumed that you would renounce a dual citizenship. However, I believe there was a lawsuit about this with the State Department, and subsequently, it's on a case-by-case basis. So it depends on what country you have a dual citizenship with. If it's a country that, and what the reason is for you to retain that other citizenship. All those things are considered as part of your request to retain it. So for example, if somebody had a citizenship with England or Germany or France, we have very close and warm relations with those countries. Probably it won't be a problem. Sweden, many of the European countries. If it was China, probably not. It'd be anywhere where there might be a concern about any requirements that country might place on you, or any loyalties associated with that country might cause for you and your work for the US government. So many countries, people might be able to kind of figure that out. Russia, would be a problem, but you know, some other country might not be. So it would be on a one-to-one basis or case-by-case basis for the Foreign
Thank you
Service,
so much.
because that is the highest degree clearance level that we require joining the agency.
It's also it's very similar for civil service. It's on a case-by-case basis. They look at your loyalty to the United States government, and they look at your activities in the country. In the other country, they look at your activities as well. So it's very similar process.
All right, thank you both.
So Huntley, did you have a second question?
My secondary was gonna be a follow-up, but they covered what I was gonna ask, so thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay. I'm gonna take a question off of the chat from Nabil. Nabil, do you want to ask it yourself or would you like me to read it?
I can ask it.
Okay.
So basically, I just thank you for your session. I just wanted to understand in terms of the citizenship requirement. Is it a requirement for everything, or is it just a requirement for the longer term internships, like 1 year, the one program that you talked about?
Nabil, can you clarify that a little bit? Because I think we're some of us are confused in regards to what exactly you're asking.
I'm asking about the citizenship requirement. Is that a requirement for all, like internships, short term, the 12-week one as well? Or is it just something that's for the longer term? Like, can we apply for other like international students? Can they apply for the 12-week internship? Are we eligible for that?
No, Nabil, all federal positions, you are required to have US citizenship in order to apply.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there, Fernanda?
Yeah, hi, thank you so much, all of you, for being here today and informing us about this. My question is just, I'm curious about, I mean, I know applying and interviewing, getting to that stage with USAID is very competitive. And for those of us who maybe have less international experience, but have maybe, you know, worked in areas that are, you know, like with refugees or in community development here in the States, what is a way that, or what kind of advice can you give us to be able to stand out from as an applicant, or how could we stand out?
Well, I can start with answering that. And I think this is advice you'll get about any position you apply for in the federal government, and that is to ensure that you are addressing the duties and responsibilities of that position and the required qualifications within your resume, and make sure that for each position you list, you've highlighted that towards the top of the description of the work that you did in that position. So don't make a panel work to figure out whether or not you're qualified. So I think the civil service is a little bit different than the Foreign Service, but on the Foreign Service side, there are a team of experts in that field who are reviewing the applications. So they are not looking for it to be jazzy or anything like that. They are looking for it to be meeting the requirement. And it's better if you don't just like copy a job description for a job that you had, but explain what you did in the job, not a description of the job like this position is responsible for X, Y, and Z. But you could have that as a couple of lines, but then go on to say what you did so that they know, oh yes, she did things that are similar to the kind of work that we do, or it leads to expertise that we are looking for. So consider that these are reasonable people who are looking to find out if you're a good fit with our jobs. There's no mystery or, you know, surprise to how to do it. Make sure you've listed your education. If you do have a language ability, you can list it, but there's no requirement for anyone to apply for the Foreign Service and already have a language. It is a requirement to remain in the Foreign Service, but we will send you to that training and give you those tools. So I think that's enough said on the Foreign Service side. There is not a limit, like don't have it be more than 3 pages. But on the other hand, don't have it be 20 pages. You're going to wear them out. They'll still read it, but you know, don't make them do that.
Thank you.
On the civil service side, I think they use some screening for language, but I'm not an expert in that.
So I see Andrea and Linda. I'm not sure who wants to go first.
Okay, I'll go first. I guess, you know, my advice would be, I guess because I worked for the private sector for so many years, my resume looked different than when I applied for my FSO position. So I think the greatest advice would be send your resume to someone who works in the agency, who can say, hey, you know what, this looks like something, or maybe how to edit, because it is a little bit different. I will say, I reached out to friends who worked at one point at USAID or currently worked and said, is this an acceptable resume that is going to catch the eyes of people? Because, you know, I don't know if people have the stats of how many people apply and then how many actually are hired, but it's a pretty large number of the number of people. So, you know, as far as standing out, I think that, you know, and this was a really crude reality, is that a lot of people in DC have a lot of the same experience as you. And so it's up to you to find out that those things that make you different. We're all different in one way or another. You will be remembered by different things. And so whether it's joining some type of like SID, actually SID here, not the one that's connected to Heller, but there's international development organization here that you can volunteer and you can be part of a working group. You can be part of that. You know, think about things that are going to make you stand out, because most people were part of Peace Corps or AmeriCorps, or, you know, went to grad school and, you know, some of these schools. So I'll say that. And then just the second part about, there were a lot of questions here about the clearance process. And I will say that if you are interested in applying, one of the best things that you can do, because they do ask you for your travel, just keep track of the places you've been to, because when you have to go back 7 years to check where you've been, I mean, during COVID, we didn't travel a lot, but I did have my passport stamped, so it was really easy for me to notate that. It's a document that ends up being like 100 pages. So you want to just make sure that, you know, just if you know what you want to do, organize yourself now to keep track of these things that you'll be asked.
Linda. Thank you, Adriana.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just ordered food and it's at my door. Can you excuse me for just one moment, please?
Well, absolutely. Babita, did you want to ask your question while we wait for Linda?
Sure. I think it just got answered in the chat box, but I'll maybe just reiterate my question. I was just curious to know if the foreign services role, if they would also any roles facing countries where international students hold their citizenship. For example, I have an Indian passport, and if the role faces India, would I still require US citizenship, or will such roles, foreign service roles, still require US citizenship?
So yes, all Foreign Service officers must be US citizens. And in order to apply, you must be a US citizen. For people who don't have US citizenship, I would encourage you to also look into opportunities to work for USAID in your country of origin. If we have a mission, what we call a mission, but if the USAID has a presence working in your country, because we do hire people to work for us in those countries. And in that case, those people must be a citizen of that country or have a work permit that allows them to work in that country. So, and often these salaries are competitive in that country. So they still have to have the right technical specialty to work there. But I would say that many people have gone on to become Foreign Service officers after working for USAID in their country of origin. They eventually become US citizens, and that experience working for our missions abroad is very, very helpful. And those people often get snapped up because they have very applicable experience in order to work for us at a later stage in their career.
Super helpful.
Thank you, Diane. That was helpful. Thank you so much.
I'm back.
Ah,
Sorry about that.
oh yeah, no problem. I hope you got what you wanted.
Well, you know, COVID has us spoiled, or, you know, during the pandemic, it has us spoiled. So my granddaughter just came home from school. I said, hey, what do you want to eat? She's like, da, da, da. So then I ordered it. And as soon as I got here, here they are. Well, at least they were quick. So what I was going to say, I was going to share with regards to your resume. Oftentimes people get stuck on, what should I put in my resume? What should I say? Well, you should have more than one resume. That resume should be tailored to the position that you are applying for. So if you're applying for something, say program manager, and you have that specific duty that you've done in the past, you're going to tailor your resume towards that. If you've been a budget analyst in the past, you're not going to add that on that resume. And if you're applying for a budget analyst, your resume is going to be tailored towards that position that you are actually applying for. So you're going to have more than one resume out there. Don't just rely on that one resume that you have on USA Jobs. You may have multiple resumes. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to share. Make sure you have more than one resume out there, and your resume should be tailored to the position that you are applying for. Over.
Thank you. Huntley, I see your hand up again.
Sorry about that, a little bit of difficulties. What career tracks would you say have the greatest needs? I'm saying that as someone who has a career trajectory that can fit into two, management support as well as agriculture environment, or just in general, which tracks have the greatest need for applicants? And also, are there any critical languages that might make an applicant more viable or more appealing?
I can talk about the Foreign Service in case that's an area that you're interested in. We do have a very high need for program officers. We have a large number of them, and so we always are hiring for that backstop. Those are the strategic planners, you know, that have to manage the process of our programs. We do have environment officers. That's not as large of a proportion of our positions, but we do regularly advertise and hire environment officers. You probably need to have a degree or substantial coursework in environment or work experience working in the field of climate change or wash activities, or, you know, things that have to do with environmental work. And I think you also you mentioned managerial type work. And that would be executive officers do that type of work, as do contracting officers. Now, they're specific to managing contracts. However, the agency does not expect people to have that experience coming in. So that contracting officers accept a lot of variety of degrees, and we provide the training for people to become contracting officers. It's a lot of training, but we schedule people to attend that training. So
Thank
those
you.
might be options you would look at.
Thank you.
Adriana.
Okay. Hi. So I just kind of wanted to go back and just emphasize, because I know when I was at Heller, I wasn't too aware of the jobs that Diane was mentioning about the cooperating country nationals. And so, and I know that a lot of the Heller students are, you're coming from your country of origin, and you're only in the US for a very short period of time, a year or two, and then you go back. So just keep in mind that title, because that's the title that, something that you would want to look for when looking at these jobs. And also, I think in the chat was also like contract work that you can do. And I know that sometimes contract work seems like, oh, you're only going to do it for a year, but I mean, a month or two, but some of these get extended. We won't go down the road of different types of contracting vehicles for individuals, but know that there are multiple options. So like we're mentioning, I'm a foreign service officer, so we're talking about that, but there's an array of things that you can do that is also abroad with multiple opportunities as far as that's concerned. And then I wanted to mention something else. I'm a contracting officer, so that's my backstop is 93 contracting officer. We do a lot of training. I think I'm going to be in training for like 5 years. I don't know. They say it takes a really long time for us to learn this. And a lot of my colleagues do have an array of backgrounds. I will say a lot of them have a legal background because of the type of work that we do. But, to be a contracting officer, the training is a lot, and I'm still going through it until I'm assigned my first country over.
Wonderful. Does anybody else have a question? Lucky. Okay. So I think Lucky, I don't know, Lucky, if you want to say this out loud. So
Yes,
Lucky.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so thank you guys very much for this opportunity. I mean, having to listen to all the opportunities that are bound to some of us, especially the international students. I know we have some limitations, but so that we can be able to understand some of the things that have been spoken about, like in the past 1 hour. Cristancho talked about the possibility of being contracting officers and things like that. And she also talked about the trainings that are given. I have a legal background, and I really wanted to know how I could fit into some of these positions. And she talked about some persons who they train in a line of work that have legal backgrounds. And also, I just wanted to know if there is a possibility for us to reach out to any of the persons who have talked about some of the things that are done at the USAID and have more information about how we can specifically fit into either of the USAID missions in our countries back home or here in America. Because, while we are looking at having these opportunities, there are also some specific information that we probably might not get in this short time that we've talked about. And we really want to understand those concepts. So if there's a possibility to reach some of you personally, I personally would want to reach out to the last person that just spoke now, Cristancho. Just to understand some things and where I fit in to the USAID so I can chase it squarely.
So it looks from the chat that, so an email was provided by Diane, which is the FS Careers at USAID. And then, you know, she mentions that it's managed by several people. I'm also more than happy to talk to anyone, any questions that you have about life after Heller. I put my personal email there so you can reach out to me, and but I understand that you might have some more specific questions for, you know, other people from USAID. So that email is provided.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was gonna say, I hope that's helpful. It's very generous. This whole session has been very generous in terms of time and in terms of access, and demystifying a very complex world. So I'm sure that that I share that feeling with a lot of people on this call. So
sorry, I think there's one more question in the chat here. How much influence the USAID has on their technical subject matters in recruitment of international consultants in foreign countries like WinRock and SNFA?
I was also a contracting officer as an executive officer, which is HR hiring at our missions abroad, which is not for contractors. However, I would want to emphasize that USAID does its best to ensure that our contractors, are what we call our implementing partners, are using best practices for HR. And that includes ensuring there is no influence over their hiring practices. Just as we hiring for our own missions try to ensure that there is the same practices as is used for civil service here when we are hiring abroad, that we set up a panel, that they don't influence who is accepted as applicants. Different people review the applications, then serve on the interviewing panel, and we do our best to ensure that our implementers follow the same types of practices. So, you know, we do encourage people to apply to those companies if you have expertise that they could use. Any of our implementing partners you can find, if you're in a particular country, you can look at our website on where we work, and you'll find the website for our USAID mission in that country. And oftentimes you can figure out what companies and grantees or NGOs, non-governmental organizations, work in that country, and you can look at their websites to submit your applications to them directly. But USAID is not going to try to influence them, for example, to say, we think you should hire so-and-so. That would violate our own principles, so we just wouldn't do it. And you had a comment to add to that?
Yeah, just to add on, since I used to work for several implementing partners, and I was doing a lot of that recruitment for the business development and a lot of the projects that we implement with at USAID. Yeah, there's no influence, but do know that there are two different types, and you're gonna go and talk to NGOs, private companies. They'll give you the rundown of how they do their recruitment. But usually these companies have either jobs here in DC, you're permanent, you're working in management, you're managing the contracts, you're managing the grants, you're managing everything that is being implemented, or you're on the project itself in that country. So you can be like a chief of party, a deputy chief of party, monitoring evaluation expert, etc. And that mechanism is like, as long as that contract lives. So it can be 5 years, it can, well, most of them are 5 years. So there's a minor difference, but I know when you go in and talk to, if you're gonna talk to WinRock, you know, whichever organization, they will tell you. But there's a variety of jobs that you can also do on the implementing side.
And I would add to that, that many people find that working for USAID may not be their cup of tea. We are managing funding, we are doing planning, we are managing contractors and NGOs, but we are not the ones doing the work on the ground. Those are the implementing partners. And many people find that type of work much more fulfilling and meaningful for them. So we just want to make sure we're clear that, you know, the type of work is very, very different between the two. And some people have a good fit in one place and some people are happier in another place. And understanding how these organizations work and what they're responsible for, doing some research on that first before you aim in one direction or another would be time well spent. And DevX is another place to look at what kind of jobs are available in that field.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning DevX. We have a membership with DevX, so Hiller students have access to DevX through their Brandeis affiliation. So. All right. Any other questions? Again, I speak for my whole office to say this was a perfect kickoff to our our DC trek. So it looks a little different than in your day, Adriana. But you know, I think this is the new normal, and I think I'm pretty excited about it. So thank you. I really appreciate it. This looks like did somebody just send another chat about graduates of African foreign missions? Okay. So Kenneth said, can USAID recommend Heller graduates to the African foreign missions?
I think in terms of any reference, we would hope that somebody had direct knowledge of somebody's work experience or you know, volunteer experience or whatever before they could be expected to make a recommendation. I think that's true of every job, and it's true of USAID as well.
Yeah. That's helpful. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and energy. And we will take you up on your invitation for a connection, both with the office more generally and Adriana as a Heller alum. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for organizing this. It was really great. And, you know, good luck in your practicum and in your future work. You know, we might run into each other. I'm sure we will at some point in our lives. So best of luck. This was really a great session.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm signing off.
Thank you.